Early on in the campaign, Donald Trump said that there will be so much winning it'll make your head spin. Well, he won, and my head is definitely spinning. So that's one promise he's delivered on so far. This isn't a political show, and the only reason why I talked about this at all in the last video that I made was because I was going to talk about the election, because the election was one of these like only happens in once in a while kind of things, and I really wanted to take that opportunity to talk about different voting systems around the world. But in doing so, I did explain how I voted and why, but I tried to keep that separate. I put it on a different unlisted video, and I turned off the comments on that because I didn't want people to be focusing on that. I wanted people to focus on the first video. And, you know, I know that's kind of crossing into political territory, and that's not really what this channel's about, so I tried to minimize it as much as possible. And surprisingly, to me anyway, the thing that I took the most criticism for in doing that was just the fact that I tried to minimize it so much. I had a lot of comments from people, very supportive people, that were like, look, we watch your channel because we want to know what you think, so don't try to hide it and don't apologize for it. Just tell us what you think. We want to know. Which was kind of like anger and sweetness all rolled up into one. And it made me think that maybe I should just do that. I should just have the courage to just say what I think and put it out there and not apologize for it. This is a growth thing. I have to be okay with the fact that sometimes people aren't going to like what I think and what I say and me as a person, you know. I have to be okay with that. And so I was already kind of in that place, you know. And then the election happened. Now, if you watch the other videos, you know that the election did not go my way. And for the Trump supporters out there, by the way, I'm just going to prepare you for this. You're about to experience a banquet of butthurt. I'm talking top-of-the-line, succulent, 5-star butthurt. Butthurt so good you can't even pronounce anything on the menu. Right, go ahead and enjoy it. You won. That's what you get to do. I certainly got to enjoy a bit of schadenfreude over the last couple of elections, so now it's your turn. Have at it. Bon appetit. I even put on my glasses so you can hate me that much more. But yeah, I went to bed at 2 a.m. on the night of the election, frankly, terrified. Now, for the first time in my life, I really felt worried about the future of our country. And I'm not talking about in some amorphous, this isn't going the way I want it to kind of way. I mean in a very real, like, everything's going to collapse and we need to build a bunker now kind of way. Like the stuff that Glenn Beck has been talking about for the last 8 years, just crazy stuff. But it wasn't crazy to me. It felt very real. It felt like my entire future and all my plans had been taken away from me, and it was like a terminal cancer diagnosis or something. And the rational part of my brain tried to step in and say, okay, you're acting crazy, this can't be that bad, you know, you're overreacting, everything's gonna be okay. But then that amygdala kicked in and was like, no, this is bad, this is terrible, this is the end of the world and you're being dangerously naive. I literally couldn't eat the next day. I didn't see my wife without tears in her eyes for like 3 days afterwards. I know people who actually vomited. They were so upset about this. And during all of this, I'm getting comments and social media requests from people wanting me to talk about it. And I'm just trying to process the whole thing. Now, somewhere along the way, a shocking number of people have come to want to know my opinion on things and expect me to talk about stuff like this. And it's something I'm still getting used to. And that became clear to me over the last couple of weeks when I had so many people asking me about it, and I felt this sort of responsibility to comment on it, and I feel like I was kind of failing at that because it's not a position I'm used to being in. And I didn't want to just put out a video with me staring into the camera with my jaw open for 5 straight minutes, which is all I was capable of doing for about a week. So I took some time and I wrote down my thoughts, and the more information that came in, the more time that passed, the more thoughts that I had, and it kept kind of getting longer and longer, and it turns out I guess I had a lot to say about this. So please consider this me just getting all of this out of my system so that we can move on with the regular scheduled programming of cool science stuff. And last but not least, this isn't going to become a political channel, but I think going forward I'm not going to hide my political views quite as much, because the takeaway that I've gotten from this whole thing is that, you know, if I want the world to go in a certain direction and I don't evangelize for that direction, then I have no right to complain. So here are my thoughts on the election and how it went the way it did, and I hope that it provides some kind of value to you and you helping to figure out how all this went and what it means. Number 1, cycles between the parties. It's actually exceedingly rare for a party to hold the presidency for more than 2 terms. In fact, it's only happened 3 times in the last 100 years. It's natural. The longer a party's in power, the more they're going to be blamed for all the country's problems. Although the power has actually been split over most of the last 8 years, with the Republicans controlling Congress and the Democrats controlling the presidency, but most people don't pay attention to congressional politics, so the president tends to take the brunt of all that. So in hindsight, the Democrats kind of had an uphill battle the whole time and just didn't know it. Number 2, the Electoral College. The last video I talked very briefly about the Electoral College, but I mostly just kind of gave it a historical perspective. For the most part, I just poo-pooed it and, talked about it being anachronistic or whatever. Well, now people really want me to talk about it. And I'm seeing a lot of posts going around on Facebook, people asking me to sign a petition to eliminate the Electoral College. And my response is actually no. For one thing, those petitions are meaningless. I mean, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think that any policy has ever been changed because of one of these petitions that have gone around. And getting rid of the Electoral College would require a constitutional amendment, which requires way more than a petition. But also, as some of you know, I grew up in a small town, and I know what it's like to live in a place where you are considered unimportant to the rest of the world. Smaller states need to have that representation, otherwise their issues would never see the light of day. So, yeah, I do think the Electoral College has its place. But I don't think it should supersede the popular vote. I think a candidate should have to win both. I think the rule should be that the candidate has to win both the popular vote and the electoral vote, and if they don't, if there's a split, then you have a runoff election. Now, almost all the time, the candidate that wins the Electoral College wins the popular vote, so this isn't that big of a deal, but when it does split, I think the president needs that kind of legitimacy. That's actually why I like tennis. In tennis, you have to win every game, every set, and every match by 2. There's no buzzer beaters. There's no last-second shot that wins the whole game. If you win in tennis, then you really won. There's no debating it. So let's do tennis from now on. Number 3, Hillary lost. Period. So now let's get to the meat of things in this particular election, and I want to get one thing clear right off the bat, and that is that Trump didn't win. Hillary lost. One of the media narratives that has been circulating ever since the election is that Trump won because of an upswelling of a segment of the population that has felt ignored and disenfranchised, mostly white, rural, working class people. But that's not really true. The numbers don't bear that out. The median income for a Trump voter was $72,000 a year. That's $10,000 more than the national average. And in fact, Hillary Clinton's voters averaged at $61,000 a year. These are not particularly disenfranchised people. Now, some of his voters are, of course, but the same could be said for some of Hillary's voters. And secondly, he actually got fewer votes than Mitt Romney did in 2012. The only reason he won is because Hillary got 5 million less than Obama did in 2012. The fact of the matter is, this was not an upswelling of support for Trump's policies. This was a repudiation of Hillary Clinton, and moreover, the establishment. In exit polls, 57% of people said that Donald Trump was not qualified to be president. And he still won. That means there's a lot of people that went into that voting booth that said, I don't think this guy has any right to be president, but I just can't vote for her. It's partly earned and it's partly unearned. Now, let's be honest, she has been the subject of the largest witch hunt in American history. Since the day the Clintons came into office in 1993, there has been hearing after hearing, outrage after outrage, clutching at pearls over everything that she's done. For 30 years, this has been going on. And on one hand, that's fine. They're in their political right to do that. But after all that focus, all that energy, over $30 million spent on over 50 congressional investigations on Benghazi and the emails alone, by Republicans who would want nothing more in this world than to put her away forever, she's still not in jail? If she were such a terrible, diabolical, traitorous criminal, wouldn't they have found something? Anything? Either she's the most brilliant criminal mastermind of all time, which I think is giving her way too much credit, or the Republicans who run those committees are completely and totally incompetent, which I think is giving them too little credit. No, I think it's option C. It's all just political theater. It's all just a big show to get their faces on C-SPAN, win voters, attract donors, and they've been doing it for 30 years. And when people hear something often enough, they start to believe it. The truth is, there are a lot more rumors and accusations around Hillary Clinton than actual legal judgments. So I think part of her lack of appeal is unearned and unfair. But the other half, the half that I do think is earned, is that she is just inherently unlikable. She is smarmy and she is entitled and she's just fake. The YouTube channel Charisma on Command actually predicted that Trump would win back when the nominations were first set, based purely on his charisma versus hers, which it turns out might be a better predictor of electoral success than anything. But I think it's that fakeness that Hillary has, that unauthenticity that public face and that private face that I think helps all these unearned things stick to her. When people hear bad things about her, they tend to believe it because they just don't like her. This combined with the fact that she and her foundation have taken in literally billions of dollars over the years, and the fact that she's always been so cozy with the bankers and Wall Street, and that she's the most establishment candidate imaginable at a time when people on both the left and the right are wanting something different. The fact that she actually got as many votes as she did is kind of remarkable when you think about it. So no, this was not an endorsement for Trump or his policies. This was a repudiation of Hillary Clinton. But that hasn't stopped people from claiming a mandate. Number 4, this is not a mandate. This word you keep using. I do not think it means what you think it means. When Reagan won 49 of the states in 1980, that was a mandate. That's what it looks like when the vast majority of people want to go in a different direction. Winning the electoral vote and losing the popular vote is not a mandate. That's winning by technicality. 60 million people voted for Trump in a country of 320 million people. That's less than 1 out of 5 people. In the coming months, they're going to try to go as hard right as possible and do so by claiming some mandate from the election. They did not get a mandate. Don't let them convince you of it. Number 5, failure of the mainstream media. Remember when Trump first announced that he was running? That awkward escalator ride down to the podium at Trump Tower surrounded by people that were paid $50 to be there? The first thing that came out of his mouth was that Mexicans are rapists. He literally launched his campaign by doing his impression of your racist uncle at Thanksgiving. But it got headlines. The media could not stop talking about it. And that pattern repeated itself over and over and over and over again. Trump says something crazy and outlandish, and then the press goes nuts and talks about it nonstop. If I can give Trump anything, he is a self-promotion machine. He's been doing it his entire life. He knows how to work the media. He made damn sure that not one day went by in this election where his name wasn't front and center in the media. It didn't matter whether it was true what he said. It didn't matter whether it was appropriate. All that mattered was that the media was talking about him, and it worked like a charm. He played the media like a Stradivarius to the tune of $2 billion in free publicity. And because the media is more interested in entertainment and views than they are with truth, they didn't call him out on his BS until it was way too late. And then they're all looking around at each other like, how did this happen? Number 6, social media bubbles. Google and Facebook announced in the last few days that they're going to start cracking down on fake news sites. Now, I don't know what this looks like, but it's a good start. But the all-out fake news sites are just a small part of a much, much bigger problem, one that really keeps me up at night. This, in a lot of ways, was the first real social media election. I mean, the last election without an incumbent was 2008. And social media was a much different beast back then. Facebook barely existed. They were only a couple of years old and were just starting to take over from MySpace in 2008. Remember when poking was a thing? Today, it's a platform that we live our lives through. 78% of Americans have a social media account on Facebook, and 44% of people claim that that's where they get all their news from. Basically, we get our news from our friends, which is kind of like 30 years ago somebody saying, well, Walter Cronkite said the Russians were going to back off the treaty, but my neighbor Jim Bob said they're retarded, so I don't know. Combine that with the almighty Facebook algorithm, which just shows you things similar to what you share and what you comment on, and you've got a nice little confirmation bias machine. So we get nice and comfortable in our own little bubbles, and as things get more heated during election seasons, we start booting out people who disagree with us, and it just makes everything that much more homogenous. And it goes both ways, by the way. I've got a lot of liberal friends right now that are putting Facebook statuses out saying that if you voted for Trump, just unfriend me now, I want nothing to do with you. And I get the emotion, but that doesn't help anything. If you combine that with our now totally fractured traditional media, a person can go literally their entire lives and never hear an opposing viewpoint. This technological marvel that was supposed to bring us all together has just divided us and created a platform where the truth is secondary and all that really matters is getting clicks. So the headlines and the stories get more and more outrageous, first exaggerating the truth, then stretching the truth, and then completely making up the truth. To the point that somebody who makes $10,000 more than the average American can feel deeply down to their core that they are disenfranchised and that their entire way of life is under attack. And you know, here's the part that's going to get me in trouble. Look, I know that there are some Trump supporters out there who have been disenfranchised and have been ignored and have been screaming this from the rooftops and nobody's hearing them, and that sucks. I get it. I do. I totally get that. But in fairness, A lot of those people have also been screaming some other things from the rooftops, like Obama's going to take all our guns away. Obama lied about being born in the United States. Obama's a secret Muslim that wants to enact Sharia law in the country. Jade Helm 15 was an attempt by the government to take over Texas, which it already owns. Obama wants to change the national anthem to the Coke I Want to Teach the World to Sing jingle. And oh yeah, Hillary's a serial killer. Look, I'm sorry, it's hard to take your legitimate concerns seriously when you're also engaging in crazy conspiracy theories. But I don't even blame you for that, because that's the information you're getting. And it doesn't sound crazy to you because look around, all your friends believe it. Pretty soon that's all you believe, and you think that anybody out there who thinks otherwise must be wrong or stupid or crazy or evil. One of the most important websites out there right now, in my opinion, is something that the Wall Street Journal put together. It's called Red Feed, Blue Feed. They created 2 Facebook accounts, one from somebody who consumes the most popular conservative media and one from somebody who consumes the most liberal media, or the most popular liberal media. And it shows you the articles that are posted on different subjects side by side, so you can see how much different the information is. And you can see so easily how, of course, if you only see one side of the media, that's going to shape your worldview. But it's got to be so ubiquitous and toxic that we can't even argue anymore, because we're starting with a different set of facts. We are living in a post-fact society. Is all this division and anxiety simply an unintended consequence of social media? We have no way of knowing. We're in totally uncharted waters as a society. Which leads me to my last point. And this is the one that scares me the most. Number 7. Trump is part of a worldwide trend toward authoritarian rulers. Remember Brexit? Remember when Britain voted to leave the European Union and it shocked everybody, including Britain? There has been a worldwide trend in recent years toward authoritarianism and nationalism. People electing strongman leaders and favoring policies that are anti-immigration and isolationist. France and Germany have had nationalist movements gaining power, and Turkey's on the verge of a dictatorship. And do I even need to get started on Putin? At the risk of oversimplifying things, I can't help but wonder if all this is, again, an unintended consequence of social media. And if it is, it says some things about humanity that I really don't want to be true. Look, I talk about a lot of really cool future stuff, and I want to see those things come to pass. But I also talk about things like the Great Filter. The idea that the reason why there aren't thousands of technological civilizations that we can see out there in the universe is because at some point along the way they all hit this point where they destroy themselves. Here we have this technology that really has the power to bring the whole world together and expose us to new ideas and worldviews and increase understanding and perspective. But instead, our innate tribalism has taken over and pushed us apart to the point that, honestly, I don't know how we bring this back together again. Or maybe it's not social media, maybe it's just the pace of change itself. I mean, think about your phone. Like, we don't even call them smartphones anymore, they're just the phone, right? We live our entire lives through these things. It's how we communicate with other people, it's how we organize ourselves. This is how we experience the world. The iPhone is not even 10 years old. It came out in 2007. And like, we can't even imagine living without it now. That's how fast things are changing in this world. Is this constantly trying to keep up with technology creating more tension and anxiety within ourselves? A tension and anxiety that we then point towards other people and blame on them? So we try to distance ourselves from the other? I mean, technology is going to completely change the world. It's already doing it. We now live in a global economy, and that has taken away, or changed the jobs in the United States because they're going overseas. That's just an inevitable thing that's going to happen in a global economy. And now as technology increases and starts to take over more jobs, we are facing a paradigm shift where people are going to have to adapt. And I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of people are maybe starting to have some economic distress caused by this changing paradigm in the world due to technology. And it's just so easy for a demagogue to step in and point to somebody else as all those problems, or for all those problems that we're experiencing, and saying that they alone are going to be the ones that are going to fix it because they're going to keep those people out. That's not just an America thing. That's not just a Trump thing. That is happening all around the world right now. Whether it's the technology thing, whether it's the social media thing, I don't know. I just know that neither one of them are going away, and this problem is likely just going to get worse before it gets better. I know that there's a lot of people, on my side of the political spectrum that have been painting Trump voters as racist and xenophobic, or at the very least people who don't care about the racism and xenophobia that the Trump administration, the emerging Trump administration, is displaying. I don't quite go there. I think that most Trump voters are just really wanting to throw a brick at the establishment. And I get that. I totally get that. But something you have to understand is that if you break it, you bought it. Okay? If you voted for him, God bless you, but this is your guy. You brought him on, and it is now up to you to hold his feet to the fire and make sure that he delivers on the promises that are actually beneficial, and to stay away from the racism and the xenophobia and all that divisive stuff that's only going to cause more problems down the road. Those tendencies that have unfortunately emboldened some very, very awful people in this country. Now, of course, if you did vote for him because of his racist tendencies, because you believe that kind of stuff yourself, then, by all means, go f*** yourself. Now, not all of his ideas are crazy. He wants to promote a lot more infrastructure building, which is something that Obama was pushing for, but the Republicans wouldn't do it. Now, of course, that there's a Republican saying it, suddenly they're on board. Go figure. But that's a good thing. Term limits are not necessarily a bad thing. He is proposing some things that I think could do some good. But his hiring of people like Steve Bannon and other very overtly racist people to his cabinet is disturbing, to say the least. He's also filled his chambers with a lot of the very same establishment people that he claims he's going to be draining the swamp of. His environmental policy and the people he's appointing to the EPA are nightmarishly awful. So I'm not encouraged by what I've seen so far, honestly. But I'm just trying to work my way through this and try to make the best of it. And I encourage all of you to do the same. Anyway, I apologize if this was not as cheery as some of my other videos, but I was trying to really bring like a big picture perspective to this whole thing and not just have it be all about, oh, Trump's awful. And, I'm not really necessarily going there. I really want to explore it from the systems perspective that I'm always looking at. And the problem is that when you look at it from those big picture perspectives, it still can get pretty scary. But anyway, enough with all that. I apologize for a big political rant. But like I said, I'm just kind of getting all this out of my system. I will be back to our fun and happy science stuff next week. And I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving in the States, outside the States. I hope you have a great nothing day. And I'll be back and I'll talk with you guys later. In a better mood, I promise. Love you guys. Take care.